Welcome to the Karuna Life, the podcast where we explore the connection between spirituality and everyday life. I'm your host, Gina Kitzmiller. I'm a longtime spiritual seeker, professional intuitive, and Reiki Master Teacher. Join me as we dive into topics like living a heart-centered life, connecting with our intuition, and unleashing our own power. Through interviews with professionals and personal storytellers, we'll discuss the metaphysical world, spirit guides, and finding magic in the ordinary. Get ready to embrace your inner mystic and explore the realms of the unseen. Welcome to the Karuna Life. I'm your host, Gina Kitzmiller, and today we are going to talk about signs and synchronicities, messages from our loved ones in spirit. Now, in a future episode, I will talk about spirit guides and how they communicate with us. But today I wanted to focus on our loved ones who have passed away because it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And I think oftentimes, and especially in today's world, often we're looking for confirmation, we're looking for signs from loved ones in spirit to let us know that they are still with us. So we'll talk about some of the signs that we might see. We'll talk about visitation dreams, what they are and how to know if you've had one. We'll talk about the energetics of signs. And then we'll talk about how to open to receiving even more of them, right? Because oftentimes that's what we're really looking for, especially in communication with our loved ones. So let's get started. So some of the common signs that I think we're familiar with are often signs like animals. So cardinals represent signs from loved ones. You see butterflies, hummingbirds, but really any animal can be a sign from a loved one. Other types of signs could be songs on the radio that just make you smile or think of your loved one. Feathers are a really common sign from loved ones in spirit. And I started to lean into this sign a few years ago. And one day I walked out of my house, and in my front yard, just sticking straight up in the yard, was this beautiful hawk feather, as if someone had just plucked it into the yard. And it just really let me know that my loved one was with me. And I chuckle that it was a very obvious sign, that it was like front and center. We are here. We are supporting you. Other types of signs that I've heard of are coins. So loved ones might leave dimes or pennies in random places for you to find. You might see your loved ones in things in nature, such as rainbows or really beautiful sunsets. Some people say they think of their loved ones when they see certain number sequences. They know that's their loved one, letting them know that they are with them. So other types of signs that I've experienced would be loud noises. And I know that sounds kind of funny, but it's sometimes you'll hear a bang and you go into a room and nothing has fallen down. There is nothing out of place. That could be a sign that a loved one is trying to get your attention. Lights might flicker on and off or go off. That can happen as well. Sometimes electronics will turn off and on by themselves. And in other places, you might see signs that are really unique to the person that you're with. So you might see a billboard or a license plate with a message on it. I first heard about license plates years and years ago when a friend of mine told me a really beautiful story about how she was upset and she received a message from her mom on the license plate in front of her, letting her know that her mom was still with her. And I thought it was such a beautiful thing. And I have been lucky enough to get to experience this myself. So I pay attention to license plates. You will be surprised at the types of messages and how clear they can be coming through different things around us. So let's talk about visitation dreams. So what makes a dream a visitation dream? Now, oftentimes we really want a dream from a loved one. And I have found that there are some differences between just a regular dream and a visitation dream. So a regular dream that I might have about a loved one that's passed is usually a bit chaotic. It doesn't really quite make sense. It can be jumbled, like the sequencing can kind of be off, and it doesn't really stay with me. And so oftentimes for those types of dreams, I usually suspect that I'm processing something emotionally, right? Just around that person or some sort of situation. But visitation dreams are a little bit different in that they are distinct. A visitation dream, I would almost say, is a lucid dream because you remember the details very clearly and they stay with you. Normally, in a visitation dream, you realize at some point the person you're talking to has passed away. So you're aware of it. And oftentimes, the person is delivering a message to you. And when you wake up from a visitation dream, these types of dreams tend to stay with us. So the emotion in your heart, or even just the dream itself, will stay with you long after the dream has passed. You'll still be able to remember the details of it very vividly. And that's what makes it a visitation dream. Now, you might be surprised to find that even as an intuitive, I actually don't have visitation dreams very often. I'd say it's actually pretty rare. I've only had a handful in my life that I would say it was a true visitation dream. And I looked into this a little bit more a few years ago because I was curious about it. And what I read that resonated with me that I thought I would share is that not every soul has the capability to do a visitation dream when they are in spirit. So, we all are different vibrations, and obviously our loved ones in spirit are a much higher vibration than we are because we are here in the physical on earth. And I think it can be difficult for some of them to come through in dreams. I remember even reading that they said that the dream world can actually get a little bit wonky and be difficult for those in spirit to navigate. So sometimes they choose not to come forward in dreams because of that reason, because I think it can go sideways on them sometimes. And it might not be in their particular skill set. So we want to always be open and simply honor what our loved ones in spirit can do and how they can talk to us. So you can certainly tell them, I would really love a visitation dream, but also be open to receiving those signs in different ways because maybe your loved one really is very good at the feathers or coins. And so you want to open to allow them as much room as possible to leave you as many signs as they can. Now, when we talk about signs, I always think of signs in terms of energy and vibration. Because as I've gotten older and I've lost people that I've loved, I've noticed a lot about signs as I continue to contemplate and to think about and explore them. And I believe that signs are a certain energy frequency or signature, which is why that I could be walking with a friend in a park and she might spot a cardinal. And for her, that opens her heart up. It makes her think of her dad that passed away. And that sign is very specific for her. So it won't resonate with me in the same way simply because it's not my sign, right? Yet oftentimes we want an outside validation, especially if we get really excited about a sign. We want to share it with our friends or family members and say, oh my gosh, did you see that butterfly? I know that was, dad letting us know that he's with us. And if that sign's for you, it'll really resonate with you, but it may not resonate even with family members. So that's something to keep in mind because oftentimes we really want to look for an outside validation from others about signs. So, I wanted to share a personal story on the topic of signs and synchronicities. And I have a lot of stories, but this one is probably the most personal one to me. So, for those of you who don't know my backstory, my husband Joe and I were married for several years. We have two children, and we were separated when he died by suicide in 2018. And after his death, I was really wanting something that was 100% certainty, a sign from him, right? Just like a lot of us, when we're grieving, we're just really grasping for anything to make sense of something and to know that our loved one is with us. And I believe it was a day or two after I had found out he had passed. I was lying in bed when I felt this very large presence enter the room. The best way I could describe it was it suddenly felt like I was underwater. And this voice cut across my thoughts, and it was a masculine voice. And it said, because of my great love for you and the children, I will remain with you and guide you for the rest of your lives. And it was a pretty special message, obviously. And you might be surprised to learn that I kind of second guessed it because in that moment, I wanted something that was 100% certainty. And I don't know what that really could have been in hindsight, but I tucked it away and I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't tell my family, I didn't tell my friends. And in looking back, I see that I was just so vulnerable in that moment. I just couldn't bear the look of doubt on anyone's face, even though I know they would have been supportive. So a few days later, we were at the calling hours. So I'm at the funeral home with family and friends gathering. And I saw a fellow energy worker and I thought, perfect. Oh my gosh, I can go and tell her this message and she can validate it for me. So I rushed over, greeted her, and I immediately launched into, I think I got a message from Joe, and I told her what happened. And she looked off for a moment and then she looked at me and she said, "Oh, that wasn't Joe." And I was shocked. I thought I must have said something wrong, right? So I went back. I even retold the story, and I remember I was scrambling in my mind thinking I must have left out a detail. And I tell it to her again. She looks at me and she says, "No, that wasn't him." And I was crushed. And I just was dumbfounded. I just stood there. I don't even remember the rest of the conversation. And I just walked away feeling very upset and conflicted. So, as the weeks and months went by and I kind of processed what had happened, I realized something that was really important and it has to do with signs. And that is, I let her take over my sign, right? That sign was for me. So it was the energy and the frequency and the signature for me and not for her, which could be why it didn't resonate for her. And so I would be careful about signs in that, like everything else, you don't want to give your power away. Here, I had this really beautiful sign from a loved one in spirit. And I look back and I wonder, why did you just hand that over to someone else and let her make the decision whether or not that was your sign? So I wanted to share that story in hopes that if someone has a sign that maybe is a little bit outside the norm, but it made you feel comforted and you knew in your heart that that was a sign from your loved one, then I'm going to suggest that you honor that. And it's okay if you share it with other people, and you have to be okay whether or not they're going to believe it. But the most important question to ask yourself is, do I believe it? And if you believe it, then it is a sign. So, when we talk about signs, oftentimes we want more of them. And so I thought we'd kind of talk about what I do, which is kind of a silly practice. But when I see a sign, I always like to say thank you. So, let's say I walk outside and there's a feather. I pick up that feather. I might even say it out loud. Thank you so much. If I know exactly who it's from, I might say thank you to this person or just in general, because sometimes we don't know. It's just our loved ones. Thank you. I love you. And please send me more. And I think that's really the energy that we need to bring to signs. So you want to acknowledge your loved ones, right? Because they're sending you a sign. So you want to say, "Hey, I did see that," and thank them because gratitude is a very high vibration. And then ask them for more. "Thank you. I saw it. And I would really love to get even more signs from you." And I think that when we come from that place, that we really do get to open up, and they may come forward in ways that really surprise you. And miracles can happen when we communicate with our loved ones like that. So I thought I would end by asking my guides if there's anything they would like to chime in for the group. And they are telling me they do. And they're telling me that the group, that there's sometimes that we get skeptical over signs. So sometimes our loved ones send us signs and we kind of pause and go, "I don't know, is it?" And I always say it's okay to be skeptical, right? And some signs will really resonate with us. We just know 110% our heart that that was a sign. But there are often times where I see something and I think maybe, but maybe not. I always tend to lean in on those because I figure worst case, I'm telling my loved one I saw it, and then that opens the door for them to leave more. They're telling me that there are some of you that are holding, well, really grief and loss in the heart, which we all do. It's something that doesn't go away. And some of you are asking, have I seen signs from my loved ones? Are they still with me? And they want you to know that that answer is yes, absolutely. It just looks different. And that's the hard part for those of us that are still here, right? I always think, as much as I love signs and synchronicities, there's still always the part of me that really wants my loved one back in the physical, right? So I can give them a hug and have a human conversation with them. And that's perfectly okay. But we want to make sure that we stay open to this new form of communication with them. In many ways, I feel like it's a new type of relationship with them. And it's one that can be very supportive and beautiful if we open to it. So I hope that that helps. If you have any questions or comments or want to share stories, you can email me at gina@thekarunalife.com. Love to hear them. I always love hearing stories about loved ones. And if you like this podcast, please follow or consider leaving it 5 stars. We would be really grateful. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will talk with you soon.